Hi, I'm Dylan. This is Punker Builds, and this is my workstation. I love this desk. It's from IKEA. I've had it since around 2006. It's simple, stable, and really easy to customize. My PC, on the other hand, is starting to show its age, and we're in the middle of the pandemic, so even if I wanted an overpriced graphics card, there aren't any. So instead, I'm going to go about customizing my setup. The first thing I'm going to do is add this BenQ monitor, and I'm going to change this dual monitor setup to a 3-monitor array. So the plan is to take the 2 existing monitors, rotate them, and put the new BenQ in the center. I'll make a small structure that bolts to the uprights that will hold all 3. This monitor stand controls all of the lights at my desk. But because I'm going to change how the monitors are mounted, I'm not going to need it anymore. I'm going to take these switches, I'm going to move them into a shelf that will also double as storage and incorporate my Luxman receiver. Whereas these speakers aren't really doing any good blaring over my head, so I'm going to bring them down and side mount them. When I'm done, the whole setup should look like this. Alright, let's get started with the monitor mounts. Welcome back to another one of my build videos. Per usual, I like to get all the material processing done and out of the way. For this mount, I'm using up some old scrap I had. It's for sure overkill for how little weight this is going to hold, but I've already got the steel. I knew this before buying the BenQ, but neither it nor the Samsung monitors have VESA mounts or adapters. The BenQ adapters were discontinued and the Samsung ones wouldn't work vertically. So although I strongly considered buying a monitor mount, they weren't really what I was looking for, and it wouldn't have worked with my monitors anyways. I'm really glad I didn't, because this turned out really solid and was fun to make. I've used a couple brakes before, but this is my first project with my very own. I'm really happy with how it performed, and having a digital angle finder really helped. That'll come in later for the more complicated bends. These are the adjustable holders that are going to grip the bezel of the Samsung monitors. These aren't exactly tight tolerance parts. The only thing that's important here are the holes and their spacing. It's not going to throw off the project if the holes aren't perfectly centered in the bars, but it will tilt the monitors if the holes aren't lined up with each other. That's why I'm putting these rods through. This will put all the holes in one plane while I make sure they're all parallel. Now I'm working on the mount for the BenQ. It only needs to tilt up and down. Now that this is all welded up, I'm going to take off the loose mill scale, but leave the more stubborn stuff. After sanding, everything gets wiped down with acetone. Then, coated with paste finishing wax to prevent rust. This wax isn't wildly durable, but it's easier to touch up than paint. It works well on parts that aren't constantly being touched. This is a pretty easy way to make a light-duty hinge. At each of these pivots, one hole is threaded and one is not. I can adjust each bolt until they're just tight enough for the joint to move, and then lock it on the backside with a nut. Alright, the monitor mount is done, onto the top shelf. This is a sign maker's trick that I learned. The foam supports the material, but won't interfere with the blade. These were my last pieces of foam, so they're about to get used way beyond the point I would normally use them. Here I'm using spray adhesive on the back of these paper templates. Since I have this design in Rhino, I can print the sheet metal templates at a 1:1 scale and glue them onto the steel. Here's that digital angle finder in use. Tacking up the fronts of these cabinets was my favorite part of the project. The paper templates worked really well, and these went together pretty easy. Before I weld out the fronts, I'm going to jump over to the shelf frame. That way I can test fit the boxes and make sure everything is going to fit before I weld it all out. Since this shelf holds the Luxman, I'm going to build this frame with 1-inch HSS that's an 1/8 of an inch thick. I've only given myself a 1/16 of an inch gap on either side of the receiver, and if this bows, it's going to pinch the wood body. Now I'm going to add some handles for easy carrying. This vise is mounted like this specifically for bar bending. It's low for leverage and has lots of clearance for more complicated bends. There's a bunch of ways to control weld distortion, and this is a good one. Rather than burning one long weld in a single direction and having that shrinkage compound in that direction, it helps to backstep, welding in stitches that tie into the previously completed weld. It also helps to jump around to balance the overall heat input. This is a rivet nut. It's a threaded rivet that sets similar to a blind rivet. They're an excellent option for placing threads in material that is too thin to be tapped. I was initially planning on putting all of the electronics behind a false wall at the back of this cabinet, so I was making the top of this one removable. I ended up putting all of the electronics on the back instead, so the rivet nuts weren't necessary, but they work fine anyways. The other cabinet is just going to get blind riveted. It's time to mount the Luxman. Because of where the front feet land, they're going to have to come off. I'm making some Delrin standoffs to put on the shelf instead. My Luxman R-3030 was manufactured sometime between 1976 and 79. My dad was the original owner, and I've been using this unit my entire life. Since I've had it, the only things I've ever had to do was replace the fuse lamps that backlight the tuner panel and give the switches some contact cleaner. I like to plan for all of my designs to be easily moved. Having the Luxman tilted downward really exposes the wood to damage. By adding rails to these cabinets, it'll be easier to store things on top of them and also protect the wood edges from getting hit. I'm going to use some more rivet nuts here, but in reverse. The panels I'm mounting here will have wires behind them. To allow space for them, the rivet nuts are going to act as standoffs for clearance. cabinet fronts are going to be touched a lot more than the rest of the steel in this setup. So these are going to get painted and clear coated instead of waxed. The cabinet handles are the only stainless parts on this desk, so they're not going to get painted or waxed. Although these are the same templates for the logo plates, this is white acrylic plastic. I'm going to use some LEDs to backlight the acrylic and make the logo glow. With a little heat, the acrylic bends really easy. I use double-sided tape to hold these in place and then use 2-part epoxy around the back edges to really secure it in there. All of these parts are going to get the same waxed finish as the monitor mount. Most of this build process is pretty cathartic, but I really enjoy wiring and cable management. It's super satisfying and makes for a really clean final piece. This desk was discontinued over 10 years ago, but I was still able to find a manual with the load rating. All of my additions don't exceed the maximum of 165 pounds that this desk is rated for. Though, I still don't want to strain this joint. Before final install, the very last thing I did was add these gussets, just to be sure. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for watching, and if you want to see more builds like this, please subscribe, like, and comment.